And one of the things that I was actually a bit puzzled when the year 1955 came up, because you can think of a number of really interesting films which were made that year, apart from Pather, Panchali, a number of popular classics. But one of the things which actually struck me was that this was the year in which a very serious conference took place at the Sangeet Natak Academy. And it was a conference called the Film Seminar. And it actually kind of put together people from the film industry, leading lights of the past, but also kind of new figures who are emerging, and a host of people of different backgrounds and different parts of the industry, ranging from musicians to scriptwriters to directors and actors. And it was actually a very substantial event. It probably reflected quite strongly the uncertainty which actually surrounded the cinema as an institution, and what expectations and fears, in fact, surrounded the cinema in the years after independence. Because one of the things which actually marks the difference, if you look in the long run, between the 1950s and the contemporary period, is the status of the cinema. What was its cultural kind of standing? What kind of validity did it actually have in the eyes of the cultural elite, the opinion makers, but also kind of key figures within the institutions of government, specifically under the information and broadcasting ministry? What kind of plans and what kinds of anxieties actually kind of surfaced in these years around this medium? Because I think Meghnad is quite right. The distinction is that this was the big form. This was the big medium. It was singular. It was solitary. Solitary in its splendor in many senses. And now you have a very diversified media spectrum, and in fact, film itself is a highly mobile entity today. When we think of it, you never think of it as being located in exactly one place, the cinema auditorium, but already in transit. And that's often how it is actually made, to be mobile, to be viewable in a number of different locations, to be disaggregated, broken up into its component parts, sold as music, sold on video, sold for satellite broadcasting. So you have a plethora of spaces within which you can think of the form actually moving. Here in the 50s, and this I think was the big question, you had this big form, the big medium, and there it was. It was what kinds of energies should it congregate? Should it kind of mobilize? What kinds of regulation should it actually be subject to? What kind of fears were generated around it? So there are actually a host of these things which actually surfaced. Validity was important because the nation state, if you want, was coming into being. And the title of the seminar, I think, put together very approximately here by Kaushik, without any kind of predetermination. But the idea of the nation in relationship to cinema itself became something to actually kind of contend with. And here I just want to make a simple distinction between nation state and nation, where you can think of the nation state as a process which is initiated by the state primarily. That the institutions of governance and of state formation actually kind of set up the terms on which certain types of cultural forms will be actually used. So there is a cinema of the nation perhaps, but there's also very clearly a cinema of the nation state. And that nation state cinema can be summed up in two words: the films division. It actually kind of summed up a whole epoch, an era, and it summed up a certain design in the way the state, the institutions of government envisaged the utilization of the cinema in a very clearly instrumental sense, as something which is to be used in order to kind of display, to communicate, and to kind of educate the audience in what the nation was about, whether it's to do with kind of large-scale infrastructural development, or it's to do with actual kind of telling people about different provinces which they don't know about, or different cultures which they don't know about. Because this is very much a process of actually kind of communicating fragmented and disaggregated, dispersed space, and using this medium to actually communicate it, and actually enforcing that usage. Because it was compulsory for cinema halls to screen films division films. This is why I'm saying that there's actually a kind of disciplinary motif which is built into the way you think about the cinema at that time. The cinema which exists, which we can, I think, very broadly call, if we want to, we need not, but the space of the nation, the space which is territorially, available for audiences to congregate and view this thing, was much more diverse. I think, as Meghnad says, it's a much more diverse phenomenon. It's actually governed by a whole series of different types of genres, different modes of storytelling, different kinds of, different senses of what conflict are, and of course, irreverence. I think one of the kind of key figures for me of the 1950s is Kishore Kumar, above all the other kind of big kind of figures whom we think of as extolling, the kind of values and the kind of virtues and the difficulties of society, from Guru Dutt to Raj Kapoor and others. You think about cinema which is also sheer entertainment, but also perhaps peculiarly inventive for being that. So there are different levels at which one needs to think about this thing. It was big. It was something which the state needed to think about, regulate, censor, ensure that it could be used in an instrumental sense, because audiences were gathering in those spaces and they had to see what the nation state should be about, and they should kind of be conscientized into that process.